Welcome to Unite, and thank you for being here today. I have the pleasure of introducing the moderator of today's panel discussion, Sanjeet. Under his leadership, not only does DDP publication produce over 8 magazines, it also produces the tourism breaking news and the daily 3-minute clip called Travel TV. Sanjeet is also the tourism attaché of Philippines Tourism and represents Holland, Munich, and Nevada Tourism. Thank you, Sanjeet, for moderating today.
Good morning,
and
everyone.
Over to you.
To everyone who's listening to us today. Welcome to India and welcome to a discussion today with experts, which we are going to talk about and tell you about what is unique about India and what you should all know and learn and keep in mind for the Indian market. I have a very highly respected and very specialized panel of people who I will introduce as I go along. But just to give you to start with, if on the screen right on the top, you will see Loveleen Multani Arun. She is from Panache World. Loveleen, if you could just
Hi.
Second person I'd like to introduce is Nakshri Prasad Shashidhar. Nakshri is from Nakshri Creating Special Memories. Nakshri, if you can wave your hand. Thank you so much. The gentleman you're seeing over here is Mahendra Bakaria. He is from Pathfinder Holidays, Ahmedabad. Mandy, pleasure. Thank you. And we have Tanuja Pandey, who's the founder director of Mice Online. Tanuja, if you can just wave, it'll be wonderful.
Hi.
Okay, these are the experts, but today to set the tone of everything going, I really want to mention a few facts to all of you, which will make you think about India. India is a unique market and is something which is unlike the rest of the world. Just because we speak English does not mean that in India you do business the English way. There are lots of wheels and wheels between wheels. You need to understand this very carefully and then take it forward. Outbound in India today is touching 30 million. It's a lot of people who are traveling, much more than a lot of other countries. What is it? What are these people who are traveling? Where do they go and what's happening? This is what our experts are going to talk to us today. Food is a very important aspect of Indian travel. It could be vegetarian food or it could be beef, which is a no-no. All that we will discuss with you. MICE is enormous. You may look at it MICE, but in India, dealer is such a big country. Frankly speaking, India is that big that I can actually fit 3 Europes into India when it comes to the area part of it. So you can well imagine what we're talking about. And as far as India is concerned, MICE becomes very important, especially what we call as dealer conferences. So just to set the tone correct among all of you to understand, at the moment, the total arrivals into North America is close to 1.8 million people who travel to North America. They spend close to about $2.2 billion. That's a lot of spending. A lot would be VFR traffic, but still they spend a lot of money. And 9% of these people, 9% travel for MICE. So they are looking at incentive. And these people who travel, I'm not talking about VFR over here. I'm talking about MICE and I'm talking about the upper middle class, come from a category. 15% of them come from incomes of about $10,000 and more. And 30% or 29% will come from incomes of $5,000 to $10,000, which is huge. Before I end, I just want to leave one thing with you guys, which you must understand about India. Indians are late starters. They do not book holidays like most of the world does, maybe a year in advance or 2 years in advance or 6 months in advance. I'll share the figures with you. 2 weeks before travel, 27% of the total travelers actually book their holidays. 1 month, only 14% of the people. 1 to 2 months, I would say about 30% of them or 29% of them book the holidays. So don't expect Indians or the India bookings to come to you way in advance and say, okay, guys, Indians are coming. No, they will come at the last minute and that's what they will do. And that's when they want your good deals also at the same time. And they want to be treated well. Well, that's what India is all about. But let's go a step forward. Let's talk about luxury. Let's talk about MICE. And that's where we have our expert panel today who's going to talk about a lot of different things. So for the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce my first panelist who's going to talk about, give your opening remarks. And the first panelist today is Loveleen Multani Arun. She's from Panache World, based in Bangalore, with almost about 20 years of experience. She is actually the co-founder and director of the company. A computer science engineering graduate who fell in love with the hotels and travel so deeply that she decided she never wants to go back to engineering. Travel became her love, her passion. While she focused on the luxury and the leisure segment, she's extremely passionate about the transformation of the power of travel in everyday life. Coming with 25 years of experience working in hotels, in an inbound travel company, and the luxury outdoor segment. That gives her a 360-degree global perspective of the Indian market and its peculiarities. She will tell us a lot. So your opening remarks, please, Loveleen, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjeet. And thank you, Mahima, Tanuja, and the entire team at Unite 2020. It's a real pleasure to be here. The outbound travel from India, and especially the luxury segment, is one of my passions. And I love to talk and exchange ideas with all my colleagues around the world. So I'm always very, very grateful for every opportunity that comes my way. Very happy to be here along with all my wonderful colleagues on this panel. So when we were discussing, we thought, how do we, what meaningful conversation can we take to you all? And what we thought was that there are so many of these myths that surround the Indian market. And, some people are on a learning curve about how to deal with this market. And a lot of people get disappointed. A lot of people get euphoric. A lot of people get, baffled with this entire market. And we thought we should just bring you some ideas, some insider tips, because we are also people who send outbound business to other countries. And hence we learn a lot on what the measuring yardsticks are, etc. So we've put together a few thoughts. I would love to share them with you on what you can expect when you come to India as a market. One of the things to understand is that it is a very rewarding market once you get through this, sort of a love-hate courtship that happens in the beginning when you're still trying to figure it out. So, you come here, you attend a trade show, or you come here and you have a road show, and then you meet so many people and everybody has confirmed requests for your destination. And you get like, oh my God, I'm going to meet all my targets this year just from the India market. And then, you go back and then there is, you're answering queries after queries and duplicate queries. And then you wonder, where am I going wrong? Because nothing's converting. So what we thought was that how can you approach this? How can you get over this sort of initial hurdle that everybody feels in the India market? India has a lot of people, and a good part is that a lot of people actually still travel through the travel agents. They like the travel, so we will break down all of these little myths as we go along. Sanjeet has a lot of nice questions for all of us. So welcome to this discussion, and I hope you find it useful.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Loveleen. We will want to hear, and I want to ask you some important and good questions. I want to hear what you have to say with all your experience. Moving on, friends, my next co-panelist is going to be Nakshri Prasad Shashidhar. She is actually the Chief Happiness Officer. Yes, you heard me correctly. Chief Happiness Officer of a company, Nakshri Creating Special Memories. Nakshri has spent 25 years in the travel and tourism industry, and a major part is actually at creating luxury segments. Curating luxury segments, that's what she's done. Personally, she's a huge wildlife buff and prefers outdoor any day compared to anything in the world. She has been a speaker and a trainer at several tourism forums, sharing her views and her ideas about tourism-related subjects. Nakshri, as I call her, is a walking, talking encyclopedia on outbound tourism from India. She knows a lot, and whenever I have approached her, reached her for anything, she's given me quick answers. Nakshri, your opening remarks, over to you. Nakshri, you're unmuted. Yeah, unmute yourself.
Namaste and a very warm welcome to each one of you. I think we're super excited to be here. And thank you, Mahima. Thank you, Tanuja. Thank you, the entire team of Unite, to putting this entire thing together. Taking off from where Loveleen, kind of left off. Now, luxury, of course, is very, very innate to the Indian community. Luxury resonates with our culture, with our heritage, with us as people. Now, just to give you an example, way back in the 20th century, in the early 20th century, in fact, actually 20% of the entire global Rolls-Royce sales was just out of India. Moving on, if you think about, a fantastic piece of jewelry, which is the Patiala necklace, till date, which was commissioned way back in 1926, till date, it is Cartier's single largest commission. Closer, 2018, you had the famous French shoemaker, Berluti. Well, he started and he commissioned his boutique in Delhi in 2018. And of course, then moving on, you've got Montblanc, which has tons of boutiques now all over India. So this just goes on to say that, the luxury element and what Indians, really relate to luxury is completely in sync. And this actually kind of resonates when we are taking a holiday as well, because they truly know how to, appreciate and enjoy luxury, be it accommodation, be it experiences, be it culinary. I think all of these make up your quintessential luxury Indian traveler. The only thing that we need to keep in mind is that when you're talking about luxury and the Indian clientele, do not, kind of shortchange him. I think he deserves to know the various options that are available. We need to marry the right product to the right client. And we need to, kind of remember utmost, which is that the Indian luxury traveler is not a tourist. He is a traveler. He is seeking experiences. He is seeking, new things that he can learn and come back with. And he wants a holiday which kind of, puts him completely at ease, and he understands and he wants a guilt-free holiday. So I think, it's exciting times. Luxury is here. Luxury is finally, kind of arrived. We are having a blast kind of, putting fantastic itineraries together, and each country has something unique to offer. So I think it's very important to get all of these together on the table and, kind of explore this with our clients. And I'm sure we've got a winner. Yeah, so we're looking forward to busting a whole lot of myths once Sanjeet goes along as well. Yeah, so looking forward to some great discussions. Thanks, Sanjeet.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, Nakshi. And I love this 20% Rolls-Royce being purchased by Indians. In fact, I've heard a lot more of the statistics of Mercedes and other cars being maximum in India, but that's will go as we go along. Moving along, friends, I like to go to the gentleman who's here with us. Sorry, Tanuja, I'm going ahead with Mandy before you, but I thought I must mention that. Benda Vakaria is actually the executive committee member and the immediate past president of OTAI. OTAI is the Outbound Tour Operators Association of India, and he is the managing director of Pathfinder Holidays. A fun-loving adventure outdoor person, he has walked this planet Earth for 56 years. He's a graduate and a company secretaryship from Anna University, combined with a diploma in hospitality management from the prestigious Dadar Catering College, Mumbai. He's a self-made entrepreneur and started his company 22 years ago along with his wife. He possesses immense first-hand knowledge gathered from miles and miles of road travel in different countries. He has successfully scaled, and he's very proud about it, and I love him for that. So he has actually successfully scaled and summited Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain of Africa, at a height of 19,341 feet on the 28th of February, 2017. This is definitely one of his greatest high in life. Welcome, Andy. The floor is yours. Let's hear from you what everybody should know about tourism. Your opening remarks, sir.
Thank you, Sanjit. And namaste and a very warm welcome to everybody who's listening on to this panel discussion. A big thank you to the Unite 2020 team, Mahima, Tanuja, for putting up this event and making us be in our sartorial best on a Sunday morning. I will add on to what my other two colleagues have spoken about luxury segment, which is a part of the outbound travel. But I would like to touch upon the other side of the outbound travel, which is equally very important and which is very, very exciting. You cannot ignore this huge segment of outbound travel that's existing from India. As you know, Indian outbound is one of the fastest growing outbound markets in the world. UNWTO has forecasted it to touch 50 million outbound traveler in the next few years. And this is a huge amount of people traveling out of India. You can ignore this at your own risk, okay? Now, the other side of the coin, which is the leisure outbound travel market from India, comprises of different verticals. You're talking about FIT travel, group travel, there is MICE, there's the big fat Indian wedding, you have the adventure travel, and you have now a new thing called the bleisure, where people traveling for business are combining with the leisure activity as well. And another very important segment is the VFR, which is a visiting friends and relatives, which is a huge market from India going into North America and Canada. Okay, so this is a very exciting mix of outbound leisure travel that's happening besides the luxury segment from India. However, if you want to deal with the Indian market, you will have to have a lot of patience and be aware of the slight and slightly important nuances of the cultural aspect and the way of life that India has to offer. For example, Indian traveler going out of India, majority of them enjoy a lifestyle at home, which will have about 2 or 3 domestic help to take care of the work for them, a cook to cook the meals, a driver to drive them around. In short, everything for them is taken care of by somebody, and unfortunately, that is how they expect while on a holiday. For example, punctuality could be a very important and is a very important virtue, no doubts about it, but it's not the end of the world for many in this part of the world, okay? So you have to be mindful of it and brief your drivers who are doing the transfer and the guide to be mindful of this so it doesn't create an unpleasant situation while on the ground. A very simple example of a nuance is Indian preferred tea. So a hotel that is a room that is offering a hot water kettle with tea and coffee accompaniment will definitely be favored over a hotel that is not offering this very simple basic facility. So some of these important nuances which one has to keep it in mind. And food is also an important segment which I'll talk later. Another important thing you have to remember is Indians love bargaining. Okay, now it is in the blood, and because they're entrepreneurial and they understand the value of money, they will always want to push to drive and extract the best value out of the dollar what they're spending. So these are some of the nuances that one has to keep it in mind. And going forward, we will discuss further about the other aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was really wonderful, Mandy. And I love the thing about timings. It's called the Indian stretch time, but that's what we have to live with. That's what basically is. Going forward, I really want to talk about Tanuja Pandey. She's the founder director of MICE Online. And before we started, actually, she mentioned to me that today she completes 1 full year of MICE. And congratulations, Tanuja. That's really wonderful. Calls for a big celebration. MICE Online is India's first tech-enabled global B2B marketplace that facilitates group hotel bookings and event-related services for corporates, MICE, and event planners, seamlessly connecting them all on a single platform. Over 2 decades of global experience and MICE and events with top corporates made her decision to start MICE Online a natural consequence of her experience. Tanuja is a member of the National Tourism Advisory Council, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, and advises them on MICE and international tourism marketing strategies. A German interpreter with master's degree in the language, freelance writer for travel shows, TV reality shows, and documentary based on tourism. She currently is actually consulting for 2 very famous shows. One is called the Fear Factor India, and the other is the Master Chef India. That's a lot, Tanuja, on your plate.
Yeah.
To us, and we'd like to hear your opening comments on what everybody should look at the MICE market. Over to you.
Thank you, Sanjit, and thank you, Unite, for having us all on this panel. It's great to have like-minded people discussing tourism and the way forward and things, how they are going to be from the Indian market. So namaste. This is the new greeting which the world has embraced. And from hugs to handshakes to a namaste, that's where we have come from. So as Sanjit introduced me, I have been in the industry for 22 years now. but I found my love in MICE and events. From the last 15 years, that has been my domain expertise. India is the second largest MICE market from Asia. And I have so many friends and colleagues who look forward to Indian groups. You know, when we talk about Indian groups, it's numbers, it excites them. And I must say that they are as adventurous as me if MICE groups excite them. Indian MICE industry is fragmented and unorganized because, the term MICE, which is meetings, incentives, conferences, and events, is used so casually in India that even a small group of 15 people who's doing a birthday celebration also gets termed as a MICE group. Across every country, state and city in India, you will have agents and people saying that they are MICE agents. Even a ticketing agent says that he does MICE. So everybody says that they do MICE. So basically the biggest challenge for the hotels and the suppliers who are catering to the Indian market is to how to identify the right partners. Yeah. For one query, for one lead, you will be having 10 queries. So that is one challenge that you need to overcome. Again, Indian MICE is categorized into 2-3 categories. One is queries from A category cities, which are your metros. Then you also have MICE, which is incentive travel stemming from the B category cities of India. So basically, do not just look at the Delhi, Bombay, Kolkata, Chennai, Bangalore kind of markets, because that's what you know. You will have to dive down to smaller markets, smaller towns of India, where you will actually find the cream of your business going forward. Thirdly, there is a MICE market for everyone, because India is also categorized into corporate MICE events, which also are like experiential MICE, like senior management traveling abroad. Then you have dealers incentives, which Sanjit rightly mentioned, which comprise of the maximum MICE that comes out of India. So these are banking, FMCG, and those kind of products. So, then there you have reality and movie shoots, which I talked about. Those are also large groups. And then you have weddings. So basically, there's a whole gamut of services that can be offered. And as we go along the discussions, Sanjit will come to me one-on-one where I can throw light on small segments over here. Thank you, Sanjit. I think I'll leave the panel for you so that you can get forward and we find a collective things.
Thank you, Tanuja. Thanks a lot. I just want to mention to you, I was a little surprised to hear you saying India is the second largest market from Asia. That's enormous. If anybody is looking at this Asia market, then they have to be in India, definitely for MICE for sure. Okay, friends. I want to leave this thought with you that any of you have any questions you want to ask us, please email your questions to us and we will try and reply to them later as we go along. But my first question, which I'm going to go on to, is going to Loveleen. I'm going to come to you with the first question. Loveleen, you have your varied experience in terms of so much of, you've done inbound, you've done outbound, you know what luxury is all about. I really want to understand, if I'm a foreigner, if I'm a foreigner and I'm going to be as a travel agent come to you, and India has a population of 1.3 billion people. Outbound is close to 30 million. If I look at it on a percentage basis, is 0.01%, which is nothing at all. What do you suggest everybody should do? Because how do you find these travelers all over India? What's your magic? What do you tell them that they should basically be doing? And that's what and in this whole magic of outbound, obviously luxury is going to be a very small segment also. So what do? You really must have a crystal ball, or you must have a magic wand. So what do you suggest we should do? Over to you.
Okay, so a lot of people actually ask me this question when I travel for trade shows and we are sitting with our colleagues, etc. They always feel that people who are not familiar with it, a lot of hotel chains, a lot of tourism boards, a lot of destinations have actually cracked this. But for people who are new to this market or who are looking at entering it, I always tell them that have the confidence that this market has something for you and focus on actually finding it. And that's the little bit of a difficult part. If you don't know, then you should get help probably. But the point is that in India, because it has grown exponentially, even though it's the 0.01% that you say, 0.01% of the billion, is a lot of people. So, you know, so there is different sets of people in different curves of the whole travel journeys. So whilst we may have people who are still just discovering, let's say, the Asian destinations, or there are people who are discovering, you know, close by Sri Lanka or Maldives or whatever it may be, there are a whole lot of evolved travelers as well. There are people who are taking, for example, 6 holidays in a year. There are people who are spending over $20,000 and 20,000 euros a night kind of holidays. So there is a little bit for everybody. And it is all about how you nurture your market, how you find it, first of all, and then how you nurture it, and then how you take this to your way of what you are looking for. So basically, you need to set your goal and then come here. Don't expect, okay, India is like this, therefore it is for me or not for me. So you decide, this is my market, or this is what I'm looking for, and this is how I'm going to go and find my people.
All right, fair enough. That actually takes is perception driven to a great extent, and that's what I'm going to come to you, Nakshri. If a lot of perception about India, if you look at it from a global perspective, and we talk about luxury, then what is it that people should really be looking at in luxury? For example, is it just that you stay in a very upmarket, expensive hotel? Is what luxury is all about, kind of situation? So my point to you is, what would you say is a luxury hotel, and how is it perceived to be for the Indians, and especially for the American market? Is it just giving them a very fancy hotel, or is it much more than that? Nakshri, what would you say to that?
Right. I think, Sanjeet, you know, when Indians are traveling, when the luxury segment is traveling, we need to keep in mind that, you know, obviously this Sybarite segment, which is people addicted to luxury, is increasing. Yeah. And when you're talking about, you know, a holistic holiday, it would, you know, entail great accommodation, it would entail great food, and it would also mean great experiences. So it's got to be a mix of all three. But if we're isolating the luxury accommodation, which is pretty much the hero sometimes, because that's where you end up spending quite a bit of your time as well. The accommodation is, you know, kind of can be split into the hardware and the software. And I think it's very important that if hoteliers are committed and wanting to commit to the Indian market, they need to kind of understand the nuances of what the Indians would really like. Because an Indian client would be very different from, say, an Italian client or a French client or a South American client for that matter. So, you know, to know a little bit about what the Indians like, I think that's very important. And secondly, you know, the person needs to feel welcome. So you're actually kind of looking at an accommodation which is like home away from home. So you need to be completely at ease, right from the time the door person, the doorman, you know, kind of welcomes you, because that is the first touch point. So right from them, a smiling face, you know, kind of when people are acknowledging you when you're in the hotel. And I think every hotel has something or the other to offer. So very important to really sit down and brainstorm and understand what are the points that work for you and put that forth for the client so that they are completely at ease when they're in the accommodation is very, very important. So I would probably, you know, kind of rate the software as a complete 10 on 10. That's what is the most important. And then of course you take it from there and see how you want to really make things work for your Indian luxury clients, because it's everything.
I'm interfering in between, but I really want to know, does bragging have any role in this for luxury part of it? People love to brag about, oh, I went and stayed here.
Does brag.
So would that make a difference when it comes to luxury travel for Indians?
Well, I think, you know, the known brands, because sometimes what happens is that these luxury travelers are people who've traveled before and they found some kind of a connection with a particular brand, maybe. So it becomes very easy for them to go. For instance, if I'm looking at, say, a Relais Chateau chain, or I'm looking at any of the leading hotels, or I'm looking at a Ritz-Carlton Reserve. So there are various kind of chains that people, you know, would ultimately feel very comfortable with. And I think what is important again is the segmentation of the Indian luxury client. So you've got several kinds. So if you've got a client who really wants to basically look at, you know, comfort when he's on a holiday, or wants to look at, you know, it differs for each person. So I would say for a certain segment, probably bragging is important. For a certain segment, it's more about comfort. For Asami segment, it's more about the USP because he doesn't want to stay in a hotel which is, just marble and with all the flashy trappings, but he would want a story. So he probably want, one of the hotels which has a story to relate to. So it totally depends on who your luxury traveler is and what exactly he really wants to achieve out of that holiday and out of that place that he travels to.
All right, thank you so much, Nakshi. Now, Mahinder, I'm going to come to you, Mandy. But before that, Nakshi, your Wi-Fi seems to be having something, but we can hear you clearly, but your photograph freezes in between. So,
Right. Okay. Sure.
Mandy, I'm going to...
Thanks.
Everybody's talked about luxury. The two ladies you heard, we talked about luxury to a great extent. But is luxury the only component which we have to look at when I'm looking at the Indian market? What about the other travelers? What about the other high-end travelers kind of situation? And how do I distinguish between them? Is it the kind of money they spend? So what's the Indian market like for the other part? Let's hear your point of that.
Thank you. There is a vast difference and between the luxury segment that we are speaking about on one side and the other major part of the outbound travel market. Of course, luxury is important. People talk of luxury and it's definitely connected with the price tag of whatever the kind of holiday that you are experiencing. But the other segment that's existing and which is equally very important is definitely also catching up with the luxury segment. It might not be spending the same amount of money, for example, but they are very big spenders, because you have to consider that Indians, when they travel, they like to shop, and shopping becomes one of the biggest spending aspects from an Indian travel point of view. Whether you call it for shopping for luxury items or shopping for regular items or whatever, but they do spend a huge amount of money. So it's not that only the luxury segment is spending a good amount of money while on a holiday. The other segment of the outbound traveler from India also is spending a huge amount of money. You would be surprised to know that the Quartz India magazine has forecasted that India by 2027 will have about 1 million millionaires out of India, which means we are targeting almost about 3.5 to 4 million millionaire outbound Indian traveler. Now, whether you can fit them into luxury or non-luxury, but that's a huge segment of outbound traveler that you are looking at. So people do spend on a holiday, period. Thank you.
So really, so that means, tell me, if you can, quick question, how much percentage do they spend on shopping and how much do they spend on the other part of their vacation?
Sometimes you'll be surprised shopping takes over the total budget of the trip.
Yeah.
It is. There are ladies groups who go on a preview show of Louis Vuitton on a special invite before it's come out into the retail sale, and that's happening from India. So that's part of luxury, but as I said, it's part of the regular holiday which they go. They might not be spending big on the hotel. For example, of course, they'll be staying in a 5-star hotel and enjoying the luxury that it will offer and the comfort it will offer. But shopping will not be compromised.
So what you're saying is, if I have a luxury product, I should be running after travel agents and telling them, get me the Indian customer who's going to come in.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Okay. Fair enough. I'm going to move on. Tanuja, I'm going to come on to you. You're the MICE expert at the moment. And I have a very, very serious concern with MICE. And I really want to raise this at this moment. See, if I understand correctly, MICE is actually where the whole fraternity gets together, people get together, we do meetings, we interact, we talk to each other. And even if you're sitting there, there's so many other people you'll meet. Now, I understand that this pandemic is here and we need to talk about distancing with each other and not to be seen and all that. But you guys are using technology to a total different level. In fact, the sheer fact that we're having a meeting today and this whole digital thing which you're doing. Now, I really want to ask you, is this a boon or is it a bane? Because my question over here is, aren't we not teaching the MICE organizers that you don't have to really spend that big money for hotels and travel and get everybody together? You can do meetings, forget the physical meetings, you can do meetings like this. I think it will take away some of your business going forward. What's your take on that?
I'm so glad you asked me this question, Sanjit. So basically, number one, technology is a facilitator. Yeah, technology is not the solution. First of all, MICE, I personally think that travel incentives will never go away, ever. Travel is the greatest motivation, it's aspirational. So while we have this pandemic, we are using technology as a tool to stay in touch, to network. But the actual events happening online, I think it's a temporary phase. But I also think that this was going to be the future any which ways. I mean, one of the reasons I started Mice Online last year was to facilitate things. So we should be using technology as a means to an end. Having said that, this year for sure, events have gone online. People are still trying to create experiences. I was just talking to Versace Dubai for doing an event for a client where I was going to use the Versace ballroom without going there to create an event. So, which means I still need the hotel. I still need the production people. I still need the event technologists, as we have started calling them, to create. Secondly, this year it's going to be more of a 70-30 kind of a combination where 70% of your events happen online because the motivation still has to go on. Next year, we will see a shift on 50-50, but trust you me, corporates are dying to get out. And technology has its own set of problems. We have experienced it, right? You just said to Nakshri that you're freezing. Nobody likes that to happen during a conference, you know. If a microphone goes wrong, you know, if there's an echo, my corporate does not pay me saying, oh, you goofed up in the event. So imagine if there's a lag. So, you know, that experience is, cannot be guaranteed. It's technology, it can go wrong. It takes a minute to start up. Unlike you or me, if we fumble, we start immediately, right? We don't need something to reboot. So this year, yes, events are happening online. But I see by the Q3 and Q4 of 2021, things will start going towards the normal because a whole ecosystem depends on it. Mice creates multiple businesses. It's not just Mice. Mice creates revenue for the hotel banqueting. It creates revenue for the production people. It creates revenue for tourism because after the conference, people stay back. They do post-event tours, you know. So I don't think we as an industry are going to let this go away. We will use technology for the people who probably didn't get visas to join the conference. Then we can patch them up with a VC. So technology is not going to go away, but it is going to help us do things even in a better and a planned manner. Yeah, so the hotels can reach out to the planners through technology. The suppliers can reach out through technology, but the physical aspect of the Mice event, I think it will never go away because we as individuals, we love to travel, we love to meet people. I would love to get out to the hotels and give them a hug or a handshake. And of course the namaste, but I don't think that it's going to change anything for us.
Tanuja, this means that if you're going to use technology and use the Mice event again, and then those people who are sitting back home, you need to reach out to them through what we are doing at the moment. So that means you're your cost. So there's going to be a new business element to it, which is going to be there. So the organizers need to really loosen their purse bit. But I want to ask you over here, when you talk about the Versace hotel and stuff like that, my question is, do you pay the hotel anything, or you just use their
yes
hotel?
No. So I just said that, in fact, it was just discussed yesterday. We said that this is, in the current situation, this is also a way of revenue for the hotel, you know. For usage of ballroom, we are going to pay them something for the usage of ballroom. So a person sitting in, say, a Vizag or Visakhapatnam, which is a small town in India, he's getting a feeling that his event is happening and he's in the ballroom of Palazzo Versace. I mean, what a great experience for him as well. That creates aspiration. He said, sir, this time, so we have done it virtually, but next year I actually want to go to that place. So, you know, you are actually kind of, it depends on how you show the motivation to the end customer. So corporates are looking at us for creative ways. And I think that's where we bring the technology in.
So what you're saying is now all the hotels should be running about with digital conclaves also and saying use our property. Well, good idea. I'm going to come back.
Yeah, use the venues, use our lawns. Just give us the credit. It's a marketing exercise for them.
Point taken. I'll come back to you with a different question a little later. But I need to now.
Yeah.
I need to go on to Loveleen. Loveleen, you mentioned a few things, and I think we were discussing this a few days back again. Easier said than done. Luxury, like I said, you had mentioned luxury is different for different people. My question is, how do you find that level of luxury? But more importantly, you had mentioned, and you believe when we were discussing it, that choose your segments, decide which segment you really work. This is to the foreign tour operators. Decide which segment you like to work with it, stick to that and go ahead, obviously. So my question to you is, for a foreigner or somebody who's coming from abroad, how, because India has too many wheels among wheels, you know that we have different cultures and stuff like that. Every 200 kilometers, things change. Who's going to guide them? Who's going to tell them what to do and stuff like that? And how do I find which segment do I fit into? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's a very pertinent question, Sanjit, and that is where most of the people lose the game, and they get disappointed and go away. So, and the other thing is that, you know, in India, there is very few people who specialize in something. I mean, there are very few people like Tanuja who would say, I do only mice, or I do only the highest end or the evolved traveler, because it is not so much of a, I wouldn't call it that agents are insecure that they want to do everything, but it is a very relationship based society here. So today, if my client is doing a highly evolved holiday to, let's say, a lodge in Finland, but tomorrow he comes to me and he says, I want to go to Goa, I can't say no to him because he's my client. So, you know, what happens is that because of this, the lines between what we all do gets a lot blurred. So what it boils down to is your capability as an agent to be able to deliver a certain product. Now, not everybody is capable of delivering a highly evolved wedding, for example, or a very evolved adventure holiday, or a very highly evolved wildlife holiday. Now, those, and it's going to get worse after this pandemic because everybody will have the pressure to do more business, and therefore they are going to further blur their lines. You know, I mean, everybody's going to grab at whatever comes to them, and nobody will have the luxury of saying, listen, this is my segment and hence I will do only this. So the entire your game will lie in identifying who is your target agencies in which cities based on what they are good at, and decide, okay, these are the 50 or the 60 people I'm going to work with this year, and nurture them in several ways of content, of, you know, how you meet them, or relationships, or coming to India and going to their offices. There's nothing like, I believe in what Tanuja is saying. You can do endless virtual meetings, but there is nothing like going out and having a drink in the evening and talking about what's our pain in our business and how we can sort it out for each other. So my personal suggestion is always that have someone in India to help you, someone who means well. Much as the Indian traveler has evolved, the industry as a whole has evolved. There are brilliant representation companies in India today who are doing fantastic work. I was never one who believed in these, but some of the people in India are doing really wonderful work. They further, you know, are able to put together like that, which agents you can work with, who you should, you know, how you should approach them, whether you should be doing, you know, fantastic dinner events, or should you be doing a training program, etc. So I would think approach the market like that, go slow and steady, do your own research, find a good partner in India who can lead you to these kind of agents who are a correct fit for your kind of business. That's what I really think.
I agree with you, or I find a partner, but I'll leave that aside for the time being. But I want to really ask you, I have been in this business, and we all have been in this business for so many years. I have yet to meet a travel agent who's ever said no to me for anything.
Yeah. Me. Yeah.
So,
No,
anything and everything.
yeah.
I never said, I think the word no does not exist with the travel agency. So how do you, what does one do about that?
So it is, again, like Sanjit, I told you, it is about the capabilities. And if you recognize that so everybody, like, for example, all of us say we do luxury, right? Now, what kind of luxury are we doing? Are we just booking expensive hotels, or are we booking hard to get places, or are we doing highly specialized places? Now, that's a very subtle difference, which nobody's going to come out to you and say, okay, I do a plain kind of luxury. For example, the similar thing happens with experiential travel. Everybody is an experiential travel agent. So how do you differentiate between these is It's a subtle game, but I think people on the inside understand it. It is difficult. No, there are no labels. There are no, we defy labels. So, but it can be done.
All right, fair enough. I leave it at that. I leave it at there. But I'm going to move on to Nakshri. Nakshri, I'm going to take that question further to you, and I really need you to mention, because I remember we once discussed. You talked about a traveler, and you talked about how do you define luxury to that extent. But here I want to really ask you, because I think a lot of Indians, a lot of Indian travel agents think more expensive the holiday it is, that's what luxury is all about. So to clear that myth, and the other thing is, I really want you to define, because earlier we used to talk about ecotourism. Then we suddenly became sustainable tourism. Today we are talking about experiential tourism. Where do these all fit in? Is this the same thing, the same wine with different names, or is it really different? And does a real luxury traveler really care for these things? Because he wants to have his experience, he wants to look at his good holiday and come back. What do you think about it?
Right. Sanjeev, what I think is important now, and very much in the context, in the new normal, as we call it, I think sustainability and sustainable tourism is extremely important. And I think it's up to us, people, responsible curators like us, to actually kind of get that out to the audience as well. Because the main difference, the key difference, as I look at it, between ecotourism and sustainable tourism. Now, ecotourism is something which is, more about taking care of ecology and environment, period. But if you're talking about sustainable tourism, I think it's more holistic. It talks about a three-pronged approach. So you're talking about, at one end, you're looking at environment, of course, which is super important. The middle, we're looking at, talking about how are you going to support local communities. And the third important is, it's fine to support your local communities, but how are you giving back and generating an economy for them? Because we need to remember at any given point in time that wherever we're traveling to, we are actually guests of that place. So we need to be very mindful of the fact that we do not upset the local community that is already there by our actions. So people need to get more aware of how they're traveling, what they're doing whilst traveling, because there are several places that get very, very, kind of famous, and everybody, the whole world wants to go and visit. But what are we doing in the bargain? So I think sustainability now, everybody talks about sustainability, which I think is extremely important now, more so because it's giving us an opportunity to really explore places which are lesser known. So we're going into places that we've not heard of before. So it's a great, great opportunity for tourism boards, probably for hotels, which are in, places that aren't in the mainstream tourism circuit. And I think it's up to them to decide how they really want to bring that to the forefront. So talking about a luxury client wanting to go and get away and spend probably $1 zillion on the more expensive is the hotel, the more luxury is the holiday. I think, the client really needs to decide, and we as curators, we need to decide whether, we talk about experiences, or we talk about hotels, or we talk about a combination of both. Because, well, I had clients I've curated holidays to, and they went on a 21-day Mongolian expedition. Well, that's luxury in a certain sense, because, 21 days, you don't have super duper anywhere in Mongolia. So if you're talking about the Gobi Desert, for example, you are staying in, kind of nomadic accommodation, which is luxury as well. So, you're talking about the Soneva Fushis, which has a tagline which says, no shoes, no news. So the moment you get onto that boat from the seaplane, you chuck your shoes aside. So you're bare feet. So that is luxury. And now after the lockdown, all of us have realized that just breathing, air in the open space is luxury. Able to walk out is luxury. So the connotation of luxury for clients is going to change. We need to kind of see and pick and choose what exactly, kind of works with each client. Because luxury, again, the segment is humongous. And I think it's exciting times now because the world's your oyster. You've got a blank board in front of you, and you can draw up the kind of itineraries you really want for your clients. And this is the time you have to be your curating best. And I think it's super, exciting times for people like us.
Okay, tell me one thing before I let you go on this, Nakshri. Would it be correct if I were to say that only the luxury holiday people can afford to do ecotourism and sustainable tourism? Rest of them will not. Would that be a bad?
No,
could I say that be a parameter saying that, okay, if you're doing ecotourism and sustainable tourism, it's a luxury tourism. Would that be true?
Not quite, because I think it's more of a mindset, Sanjeev, because if you're looking at sustainable tourism, you could look at, probably lodges somewhere tucked away in Ecuador, in the Amazons, where you're looking at very basic accommodation, but they are very high, high on when it comes to sustainability, because they've really kind of got the entire community together and they're moving ahead and they're doing something to give back to the environment and to society. So once again, you're, kind of picking and choosing the kind of accommodation, the kind of experiences that go along with it. And sustainability is again a very, very large platform for people like us to really kind of decide. And that's where I, kind of keep telling people that it's people like us, we've got to do our homework as well. We've got to reach out to the right partners. If the partners have something to offer, they need to bounce it off us. So it's got to be a lot of two-way traffic that happens now going forward, because we need to make sure in some way or the other, we have to. And I think we just owe it to the world that sustainability must, and really I'm very high on ensuring that sustainability is part of every itinerary. And the moment clients begin to realize more and more of this, the principals begin to realize that as well, and they will be offering, products which weaves in sustainability in some way or the other. So it's not necessarily, it would be wrong to say that sustainability is only for the super duper luxury clientele. I think it's for everybody. It's just a mindset, and you need to ensure that it's, kind of somewhere at the back of your mind every time you're planning a guilt-free holiday going forward.
All right, I take your point on that, and I'm leaving it there, but I'm going to ask Mandy this question now. Mandy, we talked about luxury, we talked about going to Mongolia and stuff like that. Where are the Indians traveling to? Are they looking at adventure? What happens to that element of tourism? For example, we talk about adventure, we talk about wildlife, we talk about water sports, golf. That's the new thing, which is the new mantra which a lot of Indians are going to and all that. They're going under the North Pole and with that going to see the crazy North Pole and stuff like that. What is it that the Indians are looking for the holidays, and where would they be? Would it because those are very expensive holidays? Would that mean also luxury, or would that be a normal holiday? Mandy.
To answer the question about the adventure part of it, traditionally Indian traveler is not being considered an adventure traveler in the sense that any hardcore activity of an adventure, and an Indian traveler in the past would not have been very comfortable being part of it or doing it. But since the last few years, the market has evolved, matured, and the new crop of Indian traveler that's emerging, adventure is a very high in the priority list and an activity list that is to be part of the itinerary. Earlier, there used to be a situation where they would say, I might consider after going there or after seeing the place and etc. etc. But now they want to include it in the itinerary before they leave India. So adventure is become definitely a very high. Some of the very interesting adventure activities that honeymooners are doing is, for example, shark cage dive in South Africa. Skydives are very common, hot air balloons, bungee jump, tandem bungee jumping, where the couple jumping together, which are very interesting activities. Scuba diving has become very, very exciting and interesting. Andaman Nicobar in India, our own backwaters, is becoming very interesting for youngsters to go there for a quick scuba dive course, which is a Paris certified course. So, golfing holidays that you spoke about, golf has caught on in India in a very, very big way. And India has now some of the best, finest golf courses in India. So people are traveling even for a golfing holiday. And what happens is they travel with their families. So while the men are playing their golf in the morning, the women are busy either doing their own activity, shopping, or enjoying a spa treatment or a wellness treatment and things like that. So, but all in all, adventure is definitely becoming a very big part of the activity and a must-do thing that is requested by couples and youngsters going forward. Now we spoke of pandemic and the situation that's existing. Everybody is going to be looking at opportunities where they get a chance to be in a place which is remote, which will be less populated, out in the nature, outdoors, wildlife. So there is another great scope for adventure tourism to pick up in this times coming forward. You spoke about luxury as how it is equated with adventure. Well, luxury and adventure, you might look at it differently in the sense that to my mind, luxury is something which gives me an opportunity to enjoy all the trappings of life that money can buy, but at the same time, giving me an opportunity to be focused on immersing in the local culture, and as an inward funnel, trying to be conscious of the fact that whatever I do, I try and give it back to the community of the place where I've gone for the holiday. And if that could be synergized, that could be a brilliant, sustainable luxury travel going forward.
But Mandy, my question to you, one I want to leave with you is: suppose if I'm doing a very expensive holiday, would you treat that as luxury?
No. As I said, luxury is very, very subjective. For some people, spending the highest amount of money or staying in the best or or flying a charter plane or things like that could be luxury. But the same thing for another person, maybe spending the same amount of money, but that could not be luxury. To him, luxury could be a space in time where I'm not bound by any time pressure, where I'm not bound by any rituals. I could get at 12 in the afternoon, get up at 12 in the afternoon and say I want breakfast, and I'm given breakfast. That's luxury to my mind on a holiday. Not to be regimented that breakfast time gets over by 10:30. So whether you like it or not, get up and go for your breakfast or miss your breakfast. So, it's very subjective, but luxury is definitely equated to the price tag for sure.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. Tanuja, I'm coming to you. Regimented. In MICE, I think everything has to be regimented. You do your breakfast at a certain time, you do your meetings at a particular time, blah, blah. But my question to you now, which I really need to understand from you very carefully is, which we discussed, and you have been mentioning this, that first comes MICE and then comes the travel part of it. And that's how we basically choose. But I really need to understand from you that what is, from the Indian point of view, what is that one particular thing which will make and break a MICE destination? What is it? Is it the price? Is it the perception of the market? Is it because the easier of getting visas or connectivity? What is it that makes a very successful MICE destination?
Okay, great question. Thank you. All my colleagues have been discussing about curating. Okay, we as experts, we have something to contribute. So when a corporate is choosing a destination, it's not as if he might have a destination in mind, but it is a planner or a professional conference organizer who kind of finally guides him to that destination. Several factors go into consideration. It's not just ease of visas or proximity to India. Number one, corporates usually do not repeat the same destination. For example, if they have done an event in Dubai a couple of years back, then they would not be looking at Middle East. Because when dealers' incentives happen, that travel is aspirational. They usually announce their destination. When they're doing their event for this year, they will announce a destination for next year. So a lot of good corporates actually plan out. I mean, I have done an event where I had like the 7 wonders of the world. A 7-year incentive plan was already made for that particular corporate. So each year we were taking them to, because that was how they set targets for their agents. Secondly, if I come back to the situation now, people are going to move from the regular MICE destinations to the unusual ones. So for example, I don't foresee so much happening in a Bangkok, but I would want to see events happening in a Koh Samui or a Krabi. Same, like not so much in a Paris or a Berlin, but yes, definitely towards, say a Malta or a Cyprus for that matter. Destinations like these are going to pick up. Secondly, clients are also going to move away from city hotels and confined spaces to that hotel which is outskirts of the city, So those hotels are also going to come back into the forefront in the next 1 or 2 years. Secondly, we mentioned about golf. So the senior management meetings, in fact, I had done a meeting like that recently last year. We moved on from board meetings, which is not confined to a boardroom. I call them BORED, board as in boring meetings, to the golfing space. So on the golfing greens, a senior management group has had a brainstorming discussion for their next annual year operating plan. So these are the kind of destinations that now corporates are creatively thinking. So it's not about submit 5 destinations, 5 quotes. That is not how they are going to choose from. So destinations are also evolving. The corporate MICE industry from India is also evolving. You will have the typical Bangkok, Dubai also happening. When I say that, India is a huge market. So while the A categories will evolve to different destinations, the B and the C category markets, cities from India will keep on going to these typical Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Bangkok. Those also will not get over. So choosing a destination depends a lot on the particular corporate and how you are able to move him. Visas, I think visas are not a deterrent any longer. And I don't think going forward, all of those countries will be happily giving visas for the Indian MICE customers. Because if you see, business going forward is going to stem out of India. So I think the tourism boards will facilitate. The Indian tourism boards already help a lot. So I think going forward, destinations will be more open, more spread out. Weddings will choose places like a Panama or a Puerto Rico, or even South America,
So
for that
saying
matter.
is that the world is my play field now, so I can do
Absolutely,
as far as MICE is concerned.
absolutely, absolutely.
Taken, we leave it to you there, kind of situation. Friends who have been listening to us, I never realized that the 1 hour went so soon. I can actually continue much longer because there's so much more we need to ask the experts. But I need to wind up now, and I understand that. But before I wind up, I'm going to give every one of them, each one of them, a 2-minute closing remark. But I really want you to talk about the closing remark, and all of you, this is the same question to all of you. After this whole pandemic, what is going to be the new normal? Everybody talks about the new normal. Everybody talks about things are going to change. What is the change? You're the experts. I really need to understand from all of you in your respective fields, what do you think will actually go ahead and change? So, Lovelina, I'm coming to you first, so you don't get much time to think about. But my point is, what should I look forward with the Indian market? What will be the new normal? What change?
Yeah, Sanjeet, a lot is going to change, of course, but it is going to unfold as we go along. There are a whole lot of things that we need to relearn as an industry. There are going to be huge changes in procedures, in airlines, in fares, in connectivities, etc. And we all have to work together to what I call accelerate the rebound of tourism. The consumer is going to change a lot. I'm hoping that he will change a lot and make their travel more meaningful than it was before. Meaningful can have the entire gamut of being responsible, of looking at sustainable travel, looking at slow travel, changing the destinations where they go, having longer stays in one place, going deeper into a destination. So all of that, it will need us to up our game to become more sort of really know about the destinations. And all of us, I think our jobs are, we just got a new lease of life for another 5 or 6 years. And we all as people got a little bit more important. But we also have a whole new responsibility on ourselves. And I think all of us are charged up enough to live up to that. And I wish everybody a lot of luck. We all need it after this end of this pandemic.
Wish you luck. I agree with you totally. But I'm going to move on to Nakshi. Nakshi, again, the same question. What will be the new luxury normal now? What are the things which people should look forward to? And what's your thoughts on those?
Well, I think, like I keep saying that it's exciting times for each one of us. I think a lot more clients will, want to fall back on agencies like ourselves to really kind of tell them and, support them and recommend to them where to go, what to do, and, how to do things. So I think, agents and travel curators like ourselves are going to be in for, a great time going forward, because it's going to be fantastic, weaving these dreams together with our clients, with a new lease, getting sustainability in, getting a whole lot of new angles in. It is going to be, none of us really know what the new normal is. I know we keep talking about it, but I think for sure, clients are going to start appreciating holidays a lot more. Clients are going to start, kind of appreciating the small things that we do, the small things that they actually kind of get in the destination they're going to. A lot of newer destinations are going to come into the foray, which is, I think, the best thing that can happen, because people are going to veer away, I think to a certain extent, at least for the immediate future, from the big cities, because I wouldn't probably see clients queuing up and falling all over each other at any of the large monuments and stuff. So they would want to get away into the countryside, which means that the hotels which weren't really getting the kind of spotlight is now going to, kind of come into more and more spotlight now, which is brilliant. There's going to be a lot of importance given to culinary and food and healthy, kind of living, because I think people will want to be healthy, will want to, kind of take on wellness holidays, will want to get on to health spas. So I think a lot of that will get into get into playing an important role. So several avenues which probably wasn't very or as important as it was before, I think will now come into the picture. So a huge amount of responsibility on us, and like I keep saying that, just follow the BBB policy, which is believe in what you're doing, follow what you do in terms of your behavior, and I'm sure the business will definitely come. So I always follow the BBB, and I think it's really worked well. And it's a great way to restart your business, and because it is a way of restarting now, and we're really looking forward to that with all our friends' support. So we're all in it together, and we're going to nail it.
Very well said. Believe in what you're doing, and I agree. And that's what we need to look at to it. Mahendra, I'm going to come to you at the last. I'm not now going to go on to Tanuja. Tanuja, I'm going to come to you to talk about, will there be a new MICE normal? For example, now I'm adding a little bit more to it. These kind of crises which we have gone through have happened. After every few years, they do happen. We had SARS, we have other things, and now we have had this. Going forward, even when the vaccine comes in, after that, there will be something else which is going to come in. So what's going to really happen? So what is the new normal according for MICE, and what one should look at?
So I see a very clear new normal for MICE, and I've actually broken it down in 3-4 points. Number one, when in India we talk about numbers, big groups, 200, that's not going to happen immediately for the next 1.5 years. So a group of 200 people will be split in 4 smaller groups of 50. The hotels will get into a yearly kind of like a ROH you have for the rooms, you will be having for the same group. So it will be one corporate, same price and different dates, it will be spread out. Secondly, it is going to be a mix of online and offline. No matter what anybody says, it's not going to go away for the next 1.5 years, vaccine or no vaccine. The third is the use of technology for marketing. Using technology as a tool to reach out to corporates, and also incorporating those kind of hotels in the example I told you. So MICE really has a clear new normal as I see going forward. And actually it's great because, like when it's a rebirth of tourism, when a baby is born, it doesn't start running, we have to start taking baby steps. And that's how MICE and events are also going to start doing. So I see a very clear normal. Also, MICE used to be primarily a Q1, Q4 business, which means most of the MICE groups from India was January, February, March, and October, November, December. Now, it's a good news for all of us, for planners and for hotels, because that Q1, Q4 used to be a big business. It gets distributed in the year. So all of us have little something throughout the year. So your pipeline is going to start increasing, and slow and steady wins the race. So I think we are all set. MICE is going to boom back post 2021. We are going to do double the amount of MICE, because like I always say, travel is the greatest motivator. No amount of cash incentives or any kind of incentives can really replace the aspirational value that a travel incentive brings, because the incentive traveler, he might not have the means to travel to Cebu or a Cyprus on his own, so it helps him fulfill not just his targets, but his dreams. So I think we are very clear that MICE is going to rebound, but in a very, very planned and a phased manner.
Okay, greatest motivator, and now you need to work through here, so no more holidays in between. Well, let's see how this industry reacts on to this new normal.
I always say, Sanjit, that I'm always on a holiday. I'm never working.
So,
this is what we do.
65 days here, so let's see that you come into place. Mandy, coming to you. Usually the women have the last word. I'm giving the man the last word this time. So what do you have to say about the whole video?
Okay. So as far as the new normal is concerned, like Nakshi and Loveleen and even Tanuja has mentioned, none of us are, there's no definition of the new normal. But the fact is, in this last 5 months, we have become very mindful of the way things have changed drastically for us. And I think that's the same kind of protocols going forward on a holiday. A client is going to ask us, for example, whether the hotel that I'm recommending for him to stay in Paris, what are the hygiene protocols the hotel is following? What is the sanitization protocols they are following? Something like that. So these are some of the parameters we as a travel advisor will have to be very, very aware of, very mindful of it, including restrictions from a visa point of view or a documentation point of view from a pandemic or COVID test related thing. Another very important thing which will be very oftenly requested and asked for would be, God forbid something happens while I'm on a holiday, and if need be that some medicalization or hospitalization needs to be done, will my insurance cover it? What is the facility available at the destination? So these are some of the very important questions and type of questions that are going to be requested for when we are suggesting a destination or a hotel or an activity to a customer. For sure, group travel is not going to be the new norm. People will prefer to travel in smaller groups, individual families. Even if there are 2 or 3 families traveling together, they will prefer not sharing the same transportation, might be wanting private transfers for each family, you know, things like this. So these are some of the definite protocols that will have, all of us will have to be mindful of and will be requested for. But the fact is, travel is going to happen. There is nothing that is not going to stop people from traveling. You know, it's a human DNA that you have to travel. Civilizations of the world develop because people like to travel and humans travel. So I'm sure travel is going to happen, but it will happen with a slightly more refined requirements, and which is in the good interest of all of us concerned. You know, the only downside that I see is that, you know, the previous normal of, you know, greeting human to human on a social manner of a hug or a handshake is not going to be so very prevalent now, and that could be a downside as far as I am concerned. But otherwise, yeah, travel is going to happen.
And
period.
You have said a lot of new normals which are going to happen. No group travel, individual travel. Fantastic. So that's the changes which the world is going to look forward to. And I quite agree. I quite like the. I wish there was something which you talked about, the health part of it, the health certificate. I think there should be a global health visa now, so that it's acceptable in every country, rather than every country making their own stuff of coming there. But anyway, guys, thank you so much. You guys were just terrific. I think we hit the nail on the head. We got everybody thinking, and those people who are actually hearing us, I hope there has been a lot of takeaway for all of you. Lots going to happen. Lots of way. India, you need to look at very, very seriously. Your future business could depend upon a lot of Indians, and Indians will travel a lot. May it be luxury, may it be MICE, may it be normal travel, and the new normals. You heard what is going to be like. So get ready, prepare to come to India, visit India, meet the Indians, get them to come to your countries, and that's what's going to be. So those who are in the travel and tourism industry and have sustained on and kept on will be a winner. So all of us will be winners, and I want to thank all 5 of you or 4 of you today for all your effort and everything, putting this whole perspective together. Thanks a lot, and thank you very much. Namaste.
Thank you all. Namaste.